Part of the way architectural history worked in Southern California was most people went to big cities where they could get work. Some people left places like Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin or USC, and they would come to San Diego where they could be small fish in a small pond versus in a big city like LA. So they could creatively extend themselves probably a little bit more, and it was less competitive. That said, San Diego had a tough go economically after the war, so the robust Hollywood money that built Palm Springs did not exist in San Diego. About 20 years ago, I launched a website, modernsandiego.com. I have tried to write biographies of lesser known architects that haven't been published or were not published since perhaps they were active. I like to collect vintage photographs of San Diego architecture and display them along with biographies of these architects who arguably are lesser known to the greater population. They learn about modern architecture and think San Diego is probably more important than people have in recent years. And as a native San Diegan, I find great joy in celebrating some of these lesser known architects. My home that we're in today was built and designed in 1957 by architect Sim Bruce Richards. He was born in Oklahoma, studied with Frank Lloyd Wright in Wisconsin and Arizona, moved from Phoenix to San Diego and started a career. I have shared with a number of our visitors to our home that these are mid-century modern cabins. People think of Bruce Richards as a mid-century architect or this term mid-century modern, and I find my home doesn't exemplify mid-century modern, so I've pretended to or kind of coined this term, the mid-century modern cabin. And the reason I talk about cabin architecture so much with his homes is both from the outside and the inside, 90% of the surfaces are wood, right? It's not just wood construction or wood cladding, it's wood walls, wood floor, wood ceiling. So with so much wood, people often think about this cozy feeling of craftsman architecture of the early 20th century, often found in Pasadena with the likes of Green and Green. But also when you're in my home and others by the architect, you feel a sense of coziness and connections to the outdoors, which I find very much growing up and going on a camping trip or staying in a cabin with my family is having this connection to Southern California's native environments. In the early 2000s, while we were living in a home that we loved very much, I heard that there was this really interesting lady that had a really interesting house, and myself and some friends were putting together a home tour for a nonprofit to raise money and bring awareness to our fascination with 50s homes. So I was given this address and I knocked on the door in about 2003, 2004. And this bright smile welcomed me at the front door. And I said, "Hi, I'm Keith York and I'm putting a home tour together in the area to raise money for this nonprofit, and I've understood from others you have this really interesting home and interesting story." And she welcomed me in, and I sat basically where I'm sitting today, and she regaled me with stories upon our first meeting about her entire life with her architect husband and raising children in this beautiful home. 5 or 10 minutes in, she's like, "Oh, well, you know, my husband was with Frank Lloyd Wright. You know him, right?" And that I was like, "Wait." Oh, and then I took it, then it really, like, all my senses were alive. I'm like, oh, now I understand what this house is about. And she was very fond of sharing these decades of storytelling, of all the houses he did, of raising their family in this home. And she couldn't have been a more warmer host. At some point, we both agreed that a text, a book of some kind needed to be written about her husband. And so shortly after being in this home for the first time, I found myself embarking on trying to catalog and tell his story. Janet and I, after that first day, she welcomed me into the living room. We became friends, and I would come back and visit this home regularly. We'd have lunch together and we'd talk about architecture and her husband. She passed away in 2017, and by that time, I had engaged myself with the family. And so I was not a friend, not a member of the family, but I was certainly somewhere in between. I was very closely connected to her and her kids and this physical space. I was here a lot. So when she passed away, the three adult children that then inherited the home, and they rationalized that someone like myself and my wife that would honor the legacy and cherish the home would probably be a better fit than them trying to figure out financially how to keep or retain ownership of it. So they came to my wife Jessica and myself and said, hey, would you consider buying the home from us? We really have no use for it, is sort of what it came down to. And we worked through the mechanics of purchasing the home at great peril, at immense anxiety, because my wife and I and our daughter June were very much ensconced and in love with a home that met all of our needs and more. We had a home by a well-regarded, highly noted architect, Craig Ellwood. It was filled with all the vintage furniture and art objects that we love and cherish. And then we were presented with this even more significant opportunity to upgrade, or whatever you want to call that. And to this day, we've been here 5 years now. Every day we don't skip a beat or skip a moment where we don't tell each other or ourselves how fortunate we are and how life-affirming a really great home can be. And we get to cherish each day together, the three of us living in this home, not without hearkening back to how it came into our possession and this wonderful family that made it possible for us. Bruce was very much a sensitive architect to landscape. He designed landscapes. He had favorite plantings, right? So this house really exemplifies his own joy in both the built and the natural landscape. Bruce, both because he grew up in a rural environment and on a farm and with Frank Lloyd Wright, his own house, probably best distills what he wanted to do, which is engage his family and guests kind of walking in and outdoors. Almost every room in our house has a door to the exterior. As we live here, we sort of traverse from the inside to the outside throughout our day. I've had the great pleasure of being married in my backyard, raising a child in what I consider to be fantastic architecture. And I know not everyone gets to experience that, but I find that even as a real estate professional, there are homes within people's budgetary reach that can change the way they live in a modest way. But in my world, in my lifetime, I've understood it to be very true. And especially as a father, the way you can bring a child into the world and have them experience from a very tiny frame and a young age that the outdoors is part of our indoor living space, and that there were families that occupied your home before you. Those people engaged in artists and guests, and neighbors came over, and our house that we live in today was somewhat of a community gathering space for a lot of people over decades. And that legacy that my daughter grows up within, I think propels her into an understanding of the world around her that might not have happened if we didn't live in this house, and certainly her friends don't experience probably in the same way. Life-changing is a big statement, but life-affirming is every day we wake up in this house, for sure.